Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. My name is Michelle Rapp, Associate Director of Alumni Career Strategy in the Office of Alumni Relations, and I'm here with Diana Bronchuk as well. And we're so delighted to have Rani Wise here to present with us today. I actually had the chance to hear her for a live presentation and absolutely wanted to have her do a webinar so that we could reach a broad audience as well. And this topic of branding ourselves is so important. When I'm career coaching people, I often say, even if you're not a marketer, you are in the business of marketing yourself in your career and in your job search. So Rani is going to make it easy for us to think about our brand and how to reach the right audiences with our chosen message. Just to let you know, in terms of participation in today's webinar, which will also be recorded, in the lower right-hand side of the screen, there's a purple bar, and when you click that, you'll see some menu options, and the bubble is where you can participate in chat. So that's where you'll be able to ask questions or participate in discussion. I want to start out by telling you about Rani's background. She's an alumna who is the founder and CEO of Rani Wise Consulting, a boutique marketing and consulting agency that specializes in supporting women and minority-led small businesses. Rani has worked with small business owners for over a decade, taking leadership roles that directly contributed to their growth. She has a unique understanding of the challenges small teams face to grow and the need for solutions that address limitations in time, resources, and budget. She has participated in new business launches, successful crowdfunding campaigns, $500,000 fundraisers, the winning of local awards, and national press recognitions with her clients. Stemming from a passion for empowering women in business, Rani hosts and produces the woman-owned, woman-operated podcast to put a spotlight on hardworking and inspiring female founders navigating the day-to-day of their small businesses. And Rani has a BS in Business Administration from Northeastern. We're delighted to have her here today to share her expertise. Thanks, Rani. Rani, are you there? Okay, we're just going to take a minute to check on Rani. Oh, she's reconnecting. I see that from the site here. Maybe a little technical glitch. Is your volume on? Yep. Okay, it looks like Rani is reconnecting. If you can bear with us for a moment. And in the meantime, Diana has uploaded to the chat a link to one of the handouts that we'll be using in the session.
Yep, Michelle, can you hear me now?
Yes, great.
Okay, great. Yeah, just as I was clicking, of course, it just reconnected. So
Nice.
I'm glad that everyone was patient with me through that.
I'm glad you're there.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for everyone for joining, and thank you, Michelle, for that introduction. I agree with you completely that, even though not everyone studies marketing, we all, especially now with social media and what is important to do online, we all have to do branding. So it's sort of something that, if we can package it in a way that, no matter what profession you're in, it's easy to understand and easy to apply. It's definitely something that you can start seeing results from on a lot shorter timeline. So I'm excited to go through this with you. And of course, if you have any questions, like Michelle said, just put it into the chat box and I'm happy to answer those either during the session or at the end. And we can get started now. So thank you again. So just to start with professional branding, really we want to kind of comb through the benefits. Why do it at all? And the reason being is, one, you really want to get important people to you to recognize your accomplishments. So now with so much content, so many people out there doing so many great things, it's really important that the people who matter to you are the ones who are also recognizing you for what you do and your accomplishments. We also want to expand your reach. So branding really helps you make a bigger impact. So if you can imagine, sure, everyone at your office knows what you do, but people outside of that, people who could give you, a job offer, maybe in another great organization, or it could be something where, you want to get a lot of followers and be an influencer. I mean, all of these things, when you start branding, you actually are able to make a bigger impact. And then finally, most importantly, and why I kind of specialize with working with individuals or small business is that everyone's busy. There's so much going on, so many things we want to read, so many things we want to do, so many networking groups we want to attend. So really, this is going to help us focus your time and energy to reach your goals faster. So that's going to allow you to not only just focus your time, but also see better results on a shorter timeline. So just to start off with my professional brand. So like Michelle said, I'm a female founder and CEO, and we'll go through this a little bit later, but there's a reason why I'm saying female founder versus just a founder and CEO, because it does actually differentiate me from other founders or people who are looking to support women-owned businesses. I'm Boston based. I'm a Northeastern alumni. Again, I could just say I'm from Boston, but by adding Northeastern, it's really great because if you are an alumni or you've attended Northeastern, all of a sudden you feel like you have a connection with me and we can talk about that. I'm a marketer and consultant focused on small businesses and nonprofits. So again, I am a marketer and consultant, but I'm specifically focusing in one area, and that's going to really attract people to me who are small businesses and nonprofits, people who might want to work with me on those areas. I'm a host of a podcast that I started called Women Owned, Women Operated, which I'll talk a little bit about later on why I did that. And really, my passion stems from empowering female and minority founders. So I really am passionate about finding ways to empower and build more balance in the business world. So that's my professional brand, and I've definitely thought about who my audience is and how I need to translate that through communication. And now I'm going to help you create your professional brand. So I call this the foundation. So many people come up to me and they say, should I be on Facebook? Should I be on Instagram? Should I have a, host a networking session? I mean, there's lots of things that you want to do, but if you don't know why you're doing it or what the goals are, it's really difficult to say yes or no. And you'll end up trying a lot of things and maybe waste a lot of time because you're not focused on what you really want to accomplish. So the foundation is really going to help you differentiate yourself specifically to the people who will help you achieve your goals. And then we'll go into, after this, sort of how you're implementing your strategy. So this is the thing that I would say a lot of people skip and they want to just jump to doing it, but this will allow you to do it more strategically. So step number one, and if you were able to download the worksheet, that's great. Otherwise, you can grab a piece of paper and make some notes, and I'll leave some time as we go through this, for you to think about it. But I also recommend this is something that if you have a coffee and you want to just think about these afterwards, I think it's definitely something you might want to develop over time. So question number one to think about, differentiate yourself. What makes you unique? So what I typically recommend is coming up with at least 3 or more professional achievements or experiences that make you different from others in your profession. So it might be something like, for me, I'm a marketer, but I specifically focus on small businesses. If you are, working in a profession where maybe you have some published works, that'd be something to say that's different from you. It's differentiating yourself from other people in your profession. There's lots of examples of thinking about, even if you're maybe just out of school, you just started college or you just graduated college, you might think about, well, I don't have a ton of things to make me different from other graduates. But you might say, because you're young, because you're coming with no or little experience, that you're more moldable, that you're someone who can take on more tasks and learn from scratch and therefore adapt to, the culture or the requirements of that company or that business. So I'll give you a few, more seconds to kind of think through these. And I would definitely think about if you want to share some in the chat, if you have some ideas or if you have questions because you're in an interesting industry and you can't think through sort of what makes you different. But I would really think about if you have an employee or a colleague that sits next to you at work, what makes you different from them? And that's what I would really focus on and think about those things that make you unique. So the second one we want to think about, the second kind of problem you want to answer is, what are your professional goals? Define them. Your goals should be measurable. So I wouldn't make a goal that says, I want to be happy in my work. That's going to be a little bit more difficult to measure and say, okay, well, my branding strategy worked because I'm happy. We want to think about things like, if you want a promotion, if you were hoping to become a speaker at one of your industry events, if you were thinking about that you want, to be a partner at your firm. So all of those types of examples are great professional goals that you can really set and say, this is what I want to achieve today. I always mention too, if your personal life affects your professional goals, it's really good to include some of those personal goals as well. So for example, if you were moving to California, if you wanted to move to California, that was one of your goals, and you're in Boston right now, it's good to put that on your list because it's going to change the type of people we want to market to so that you achieve what you want in that area and in that location as well as where you are today. So I would think about those, and again, these might change over time. So I would think about today, sort of what you were hoping to accomplish, and usually 2 to 3 is a great starting point. So again, if you want to share anything in the chat, feel free, or I'm just going to keep moving through and we can kind of always revisit these later. Great. So the third is a little bit something that I would say most people don't always think about right away. But I think it's so important because it's always important as a marketer to know who your audience is. So in the same light, we want to make sure if you're thinking about your professional goals, we want to think about who are you trying to market to. So we're going to call these buyer personas. These are the people who buy into your professional brand that allow you to be successful. So we're going to create buyer personas for the groups of people you need to achieve your goals. So this could be your boss. It could be industry peers. Maybe you need people in the industry to look to you and say, okay, she or he is an expert. It could be clients. Maybe you want, to attract a really, amazing client, get them on board, and that will really help you reach all the goals that you're aiming for. And what I would say with creating these personas is think about their demographic information, be as detailed as possible. So one important thing about it is, who are they? What's their job title? Where do they work? What's their day-to-day life? What do they do at work? What do they do at home? What types of things are they, applying in their day-to-day life? So those are the things that you want to think about, those details, because the more details that you understand, the more we're able to put our content where they are. So it's really going to be important to say, maybe it's your boss, but you want to think about whether she or he is, at a senior level position at the firm, or whether he or she, is working remotely, and so he or she doesn't have that access to the office. So just kind of thinking about sort of who those people are and who are the important people that you need in order to achieve your professional goals. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I know these can be a little bit vague, so I want you to really think through them before we get to the next section. Okay, and then number 4, we want to identify the channels each of those personas use to gather information or opinions. So think about, that person or those people that you identified in the previous step. Where are they learning? What are they reading? Channels can be online. I know a lot of my colleagues use sites like LinkedIn, and they're on all day. Especially recruiters, I would say, they're always on LinkedIn. They're always posting things. So that's a great channel to say that that's important to one of your personas. It could also be published works if there's industry magazines that they read, or maybe there's a specific blog or online journal that people are subscribing to. And then finally, think about in-person encounters. So do the personas that you outlined, are they referencing you because of, referrals? Do they go to networking groups? Do the people that they actually listen to come from, a face-to-face interaction? So think about all those channels, and sometimes when you're doing the worksheet, it's nice to just kind of write the persona and decide which channels each persona specifically is on. And that really helps determine what to do. Great. And then finally, the last step is just the experiences or qualities you need to achieve each goal. So if you think about it now, you've decided who needs to buy in to who you are and who you want to be and what those goals are. You've decided where they are actually listening and reading. And now we actually need to decide, well, what do you need to actually for them to be able to interpret that, okay, this person is someone who, yes, deserves that promotion, or yes, should be a speaker at my conference. So you want to list those experience or qualities you need to achieve the goals. What's important or meaningful to each of the buyer personas. It could be years of experience, job title. Maybe they're looking at your Instagram followers, which can definitely happen in marketing. I always think, if you're someone who wants to, be a professor or work on, teaching, you probably need a master's degree or a PhD. So it might be education. For someone in a service business like mine, reviews are great, collecting testimonials, having more online reviews. So all of those types of things are things that I might need that I don't have today. So those are the 5 steps. Now what's going to happen is you're going to take all of that information and reference it as we decide what your strategy is. So you're ready to launch your professional brand. I would definitely recommend, as we go through this, think about some of the things that we talked about in the foundation, but you may develop this over time. But what's really important here is that you're applying it specifically to you and not necessarily it on, this wouldn't be something that you don't want it to be like anyone else. You want to be unique. And so that foundation information is what really makes your strategy unique to you. So let's get started. Launching your branding strategy, I have 4 steps here. The first is telling your story, making sure that what you're telling is consistent and that your story is uniquely yours. The second is making your impression. So then we want people to actually notice you. We want people to say, oh, wow, like this person is different. This is someone I want to recognize. I mean, that's a brand. That's something that's unique to you. Then we'll attract attention. So once we have that uniquely you story, we're making an impression, you are where you need to be, then we need to actually have people want to engage with you. So we want to actually attract people to you so that they want to connect and they want to help you achieve your goals. And then finally, you want to provide value. So providing value is something that's not always thought about when you're asking or needing something from someone else, that you provide value back, but usually that's the quickest way to achieve your goals. So let's start with telling your story first. So when you write your story should speak directly to your buyer persona. So I'm sure a lot of you have thought about times where you've had to write a bio. It might be something like on a LinkedIn profile, or even maybe you were sitting on a panel. You really want to make sure that what you have there, speaking to the people that you have identified, will help you achieve your goals. So they understand specifically who you are and what you do. It's also really important to incorporate those experiences and qualities that they value. So they might be things that you don't necessarily have yet, but that's why you want to build that list so that you can start listing, maybe you have that education or you've been published in a certain journal. Whatever that looks like, those are the things that you want to include in your story. So the first step I say is create an impactful tagline. This tagline should be memorable, clever, and or humorous, depending on how your buyer persona receives you and wants to receive you. If you're in a very professional, serious profession, you probably don't want it to be fun or sarcastic. But if you're in marketing, it's usually a little fun to add something different. Usually the tagline is written in the first person, and I would say it's probably like a sentence if you're really thinking through, or maybe a sentence or two. And I'll give you some examples next. Then I would recommend you write your professional bio. So it's really important that you include all the unique achievements and experiences that you identified in step number 1 of the foundation. So as you think through, what do I write in my bio, we need to write things that doesn't make you look like anyone else. You are so unique, you have unique experiences, so those are the things that need to be highlighted. This one should usually be written in the third person. And be ready to update this as you start to achieve your goals. So I typically always keep my bio in a Google Drive doc. That allows me to just continue adding things as I have experienced things, or maybe if I do something different that I want to add in. And it allows me to keep different variations of my bio too, a short version, a long version, just have lots of things on hand so I can adapt it and apply it when needed. And then finally, collecting public reviews. This is really important nowadays, where people are, searching online to get references, and they want other people to tell them what the best food is in Boston, or who the best resource is on a particular topic. So it's really important to let others write your story too. I recommend acquiring online recommendations. That could be something as simple as LinkedIn and asking people to write a review for you there. It could be press features if you have, newsworthy things that you feel like, this is definitely something that someone else could be talking about. Or it can be just, engagement on your profiles from managers, colleagues, friends, and influencers. So I think a lot about, if people are commenting on your posts or they're interacting and they say, oh, yes, you're so great at this. Thank you so much for this information. It allows other people to do that and say, oh, they must know what they're talking about. So it does help to have other people also support the things that you're saying about yourself, just to validate it even more if people are really doing that search. So a few examples I like to show is, one, this is a Twitter profile, the one, Isa Watson. She has on her tagline, which I love, is people always talk about community, but I actually build them. it's unique, it's different, it's addressing what people normally do, but then differentiating herself in it in a very short, quick way. So if you can have a tagline like this about yourself, and if you remember, if you all have LinkedIn profiles, a lot of those LinkedIn profiles, they allow you to put a tagline right underneath your name. So that's where this can live. It could be your Twitter bio. It could be, a tagline that you put on a pamphlet with your name on it. I mean, it could be a lot of things that you use. Some people might even put it on their business card if it's really that strong. The other example I have, I love this long bio from Betty Francisco. It's her, long bio written in the third person. And one of the lines that she has here is, she is known as a powerful convener and collaborator, unapologetic about creating visibility for communities of color. She could just say that she is really great at bringing people together and supporting other people. She could say that very simply. But what this means to me is that, she's unique, she's different, she's focusing on a particular area, and she's really making an impact. And so I think this long bio, you have that opportunity to really write something that's unique and different, really highlights why, you're not like everyone else and why people should take notice of you. So as you kind of are looking through other people's LinkedIns, I think you'll start noticing what people are writing about themselves, and you can start making yours even more different. So the second step is making your impression. So now that we have your story down, we know what we're going to say about you. Now we want to actually make sure that you're making an impression with the right people that you've identified in your personas. So this step is really thinking about joining organizations and networks where your buyer personas are active. So just like we outlined those channels in step 3, it's going to be really important to think through, okay, now where are the people that I need to impact? Where are they active? Create professional accounts on these channels where your personas will find you, and then be distinctive to stand out from the crowd. So for example, if a lot of the personas are on LinkedIn, for example, you want to make sure you're on LinkedIn, and you want to make sure that you're actually participating wherever they are. So the first step I would always recommend is invest in your imagery. Acquire a professional photo for your profiles. I'm a marketer. I'm a visual person, so it's so important that if I see not a professional photo, or someone's cropped out of the photo in your LinkedIn profile, I think, okay, they're not really professional. Maybe they just create a LinkedIn for fun. But I really do think putting that investment into your imagery really reciprocates that feeling that you want to portray, which is usually professional, worthy of your goals. Another thing you could think about is creating a distinctive business card. I'm a huge fan of Moo. If anyone's used that, it really lets you, it's like soft paper. It lets you do, very cool things on your business card. And if you can imagine at a networking event, everyone's handing out business cards. If you handed out your business card and it looked different, all of a sudden you're going to be remembered. I know even Moo's cards are a little thicker, so it would stand out in the stack actually physically. Depending on what your goals are, you might also want to create a website or a logo. Those types of things definitely validate you as professional, and will actually differentiate you from people who don't have those things, or have something that's not nearly as nice. I would also recommend to be consistent in messaging. So you want to update your profile descriptions and public bios with your story. Make small adjustments based on which personas are active on each channel, but really wherever people find you, they need to find the same story. If they find something different and then it uses them, they're no longer going to be associating you with your brand that you're trying to portray. So it's really important that it's consistent on every network. And then finally, I always recommend remove distractions, especially if you have a personal account that maybe doesn't reflect you as professionally as you'd hope them to. I would recommend making them private, or removing accounts that don't align with your goals, especially if it's a personal social media account. If you don't want someone who's potentially hiring you finding that, I would recommend taking it down, or just making it private. If you have an inactive Twitter account, I would say, take it down so that people don't think that you're just inactive and maybe not relevant on what's new. So those are the types of things to kind of make sure that if someone Googles you, everything they find is consistent and it's all active because you're actively using them. So the people who I think do this best are actually influencers. So a lot of times, they have 4 different networks, they have 6 different channels that they're using, and everything feels consistent. So this is someone who I really admire. She's a Northeastern alum. And I love that when you look at her 4 channels, so she's on Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, and her website. And if you look at them, they all feel the same. They have the same message, they have the same name, even the photo's the same. And what that means to me is that, she's consistent in her messaging. So her brand is so clear to me versus if I landed here and it was 4 different things that I got from each of these networks. So this is how you can really make an impression no matter where someone finds you, by being consistent. So the third step is attracting attention. So you have your story, you're on the channel that you need to be on, but then how do we get actually people to talk with you or to engage with you and to take notice? So attracting attention is really actively participating on the channels where your buyer personas are engaged and influenced. We want to draw positive attention to your profile and provide a reason to connect. So first, I always recommend find relevant conversations. Social media makes this so easy. You can follow hashtags related to your industry or goals, or even if you're more of someone who likes to be in person with people, you could attend gatherings and events. And I will say, if you're going to an event, especially if a networking event, the best way to do it is to find the host's social media accounts, whether it's an organizer or maybe there's a speaker that's going to speak that day, and see what hashtags they're using associated with that event. So anytime I'm going to a networking event or a conference, I make sure I take note of all the hashtags that event is using, so then I can use those when I'm at the event. It's almost like making it that much more engaging. I'm networking even further using all my social profiles by engaging that event hashtag. I also recommend tagging the organizers and other participants. So it's really about participating where you want to, be in that dialogue with the right type of people. I then recommend authentically engaging. So if you think about it, you want to like, share, and comment on people's content. So if you were at an event, for example, and people were commenting and tagging, it'd be great for you to leave a comment. But what you really should do is make sure your comment reflects your brand. So a lot of times, I see someone who posts about, a farmer's market, and knowing that I work with female founders, small businesses, it's so cool to write on there, oh, I love this farmer's market, but boy, does it get hot. I've tabled it once, and it definitely isn't easy of an experience. And that person reads that and realizes, like, okay, I'm really writing that, and I have experience in what I'm talking about. So they're going to write back and maybe follow me back. So really, the engagement should reflect who you are and be more authentic. And then finally, I recommend be timely with a follow-up, especially when you're connecting with people, whether it's on social media or in person. Normally people are connecting people so often that you can be easily forgotten, even when we make you memorable with your brand. So it's really important to connect on a site like LinkedIn or follow on social media while they still remember you. So my rule usually is, like, within 24 hours, if I've met someone, that I want them to remember who I am, because they get their potential client or their potential partner, whatever that looks like. I make sure I connect with them within 24 hours. And then what's really nice about that, if you think about a networking event, maybe you met someone briefly, you only had a minute to talk with them, and then they met 50 other people that day. You probably didn't have the opportunity to tell them about all the papers you've written or about all the amazing work that you've done. So it's really a great opportunity to connect with them immediately after, while you're still top of mind, maybe on LinkedIn, for example, and then they can go and click through to your LinkedIn and see all of your experiences. They can read your bio that differentiates you. They got your tagline. They think it's clever. Whatever that means afterwards, it just extends that connection a little further. So timely follow-up is really important. And especially on LinkedIn, where they give you the opportunity to write something when you're engaging. It could be something like, I know we didn't get a lot of time to talk, but I would love connected on LinkedIn. I really admire the work that you've done, and hope that you stay in touch. So those types of connections can be really valuable. And then down the road, when you do want to reach out to that person, they will remember who you are. So a few examples of this. I have on the left side here, where it says the women's co-working space, I would recommend looking at types of online networking groups that allow you to really reach your target demographic. So this woman, she actually has a co-working space that she's trying to fill and get people there. So she wrote on Boston Businesswomen's networking group and introduced herself and told everyone about what she does. As you can imagine, that's the right target demographic. It's a networking group specifically for businesswomen who probably, would use a co-working space. So she's really picking her target demographic, joining the network, and then participating there. In the top corner with the LinkedIn was an example of someone I actually met at a wedding. So she was, I think she was the maid of honor, and she's an owner and event planner in Boston. And I realized, wow, she's a great connection to have. It might be a potential client down the road. So even though I met her very briefly, it was a wedding. I wasn't going to get into business. I sent her a LinkedIn invitation afterward. I told her it was great meeting you briefly at Jay and Debbie's wedding. Would love to grab a coffee and learn more about what you do. Gave her my email address. And I did that with, actually I waited a little bit because of the wedding, but I did it the next day within the weekend. So it was definitely something where, everything that I was saying, she could remember. Even if she didn't remember me, she was probably like, okay, at least she was at the wedding. So there's definitely a tie back here. And then Instagram on the bottom corner definitely makes it so it's super easy to follow hashtags and engage with other people using that hashtag. So one of the hashtags I use is women in business. I use female founder, women-owned business. And when I know that people who are using that hashtag are probably either, they're either female founders or they're people who are marketing to female founders, I'm still engaging with the right people. And it makes it much easier when there's so much content out there to actually only see in my feed, all of the people who are using these types of hashtags. That's going to really make it easier for me to connect with the right people on the right place. And instead of, spending all my time on Instagram just commenting on random posts, I'm commenting on posts that are potentially people who could help me with my professional goals. So finally is providing value. So again, just to kind of step back, we have your bio and story written. You've got those all down. They differentiate you. We know the networks you need to be participating on, and then we know how to get people to attract. We know how to attract people to you. So now what's really important is now how do we actually get them to provide value to you? And actually the answer is going to be that you provide value to them. So first, we want to offer something your buyer personas need so that they find you helpful and knowledgeable. This is what will really set you apart. I don't know if a lot of people have had an experience where someone asked them, I would love to grab coffee, and you went home and said, I'm really busy. I would love to grab coffee with them, but I don't really see the value in that. So it's really important that you make that clear to the person that you're trying to connect with too. So you want to share content specifically on the channels where they gather information and opinions and make whatever you're sharing really valuable to them or interesting to them. So the first step in doing this is share your expertise. Use your networks, especially where they're active, to publish your original content. It could be a blog, maybe you have videos, ebooks, articles, or even a podcast. My favorite strategy in doing this, though, is actually if you have someone who is, definitely one of your personas, maybe they're not completely bought into everything yet, but they're willing to help you, they're a great connection. I always ask for input on my content from that person. And what happens is then they give me feedback. They've taken the time. I appreciate it so much. I recognize that they're an expert, which they, I think, also appreciate. And then they also feel invested in the success of my content. So just say I did have a blog post and I emailed it to a friend who's a marketer at a VP of marketing that I just think is amazing. She could definitely help me in my career. So I send her my blog post and I say, hey, if you have any moments to just review this, I would love your input. You would definitely make this even better. She gives me some edits, I make the changes, and then I send her the final link when I've published it. I tell her how grateful I am. More than likely, she's willing to share that at that point. She invested, like she helped contribute to that. And then at the same time, I've kind of stroked her ego a little bit by making her realize that, I appreciated her opinion. So finding opportunities like this definitely can get people that you're trying to attract invested in your brand, and they can actually help, make it a lot more strong and extend the reach out a lot further than you could. The second one is to engage thoughtfully. So I would definitely recommend share your insights and comments on content shared by your buyer personas to spark conversations with the author and their network. My favorite thing to do this with is actually with press. So a lot of them, I see a lot of press that people are writing about topics that relate exactly what I do. So I'll tweet the press article and I'll actually tag the person and I'll leave a comment on what I think about that article. And it really does show that, I'm helpful. Maybe I say, hey, you featured these 4 female founders. They're awesome. There's another female founder that I think would be a great fit. And, I'm providing that extra value. So my engagements isn't just a like. It's not just, hey, love this. It's actually being much more specific on how I can benefit them and provide them extra value through our communication. And then finally, connect your network. I always think making introductions is so easy to do, especially if it's going to benefit both parties. But the real benefit here is that then once you refer someone, they're so much more likely to refer you back. So, you make introductions, you can host events to bring your network together. And I always find that when I refer someone to a client, that client easily refers back. So I do recommend thinking about that, even in your colleagues. If your colleague is looking for a resource and you can provide that resource, they might provide you as a resource down the road. So a few examples of this. One thing I did launch, I mentioned earlier, is I have a podcast, and it's a podcast that I launched because of my brand, which I'll kind of tie back right now. So the podcast is women-owned, women-operated. I specifically interview female founders who are one of my personas, and they are, people who are influential, maybe potential clients. They definitely have a strong following, but they're women that I really admire and would love to meet. So instead of just saying, I would love to grab a coffee and learn more about what you do, I'm providing value. I say, I have a podcast. I'd love to have you on it. I'll feature you. It's obviously free. Just an hour of your time. I'm going to interview you and ask you about what you do. And then you're welcome to promote that. And so, it's kind of a win-win for both of us. I get to meet her, and she gets to promote her story through my podcast. And so one of the examples is, if anyone lives in Boston here, one of the people I interviewed for my podcast is named, she goes by Chalk Boss. She does all the chalk art all over the city of Boston, at restaurants and events and stores. And so I reached out to her and I said, I just would love to hear how you got started, how you started this business. She got back to me, was really excited. And so when we finally published her podcast episode, you can see, our post went up. And then she shared that post and said, honored to have been asked by Rani Wise for a podcast interview. So that was really great. I provided her value through our connection. And then even further, she ended up getting a press article because of that podcast feature. So if you think about now, she might down the road want to work with me as a client. She definitely probably would refer me. But all of the time I spent doing this podcast is paying off for me because I'm meeting the right people. Podcast is getting more eyes on it. And on top of that, it's more eyes by the right type of persona that I created. So if you can think about different ways that you can provide those people that need to buy in to your professional goals and to your professional brand, that you can provide them value, that's definitely going to see a lot better, stronger return in the long run. So, you've got the 4 steps. I would definitely recommend, taking time to work through that foundation. The more detailed you can get there, the more effective these 4 steps will be. So what you want to think about, though, is it's always going to evolve. So my favorite thing to do is always to Google myself. Are the top results what you want? If you're starting to see an old Twitter profile, or maybe you see something from college that's super outdated, you should find opportunities to create new content to replace that content. And eventually over time, that Google search, that whole first page is going to be all things that you want to be shown about you. So if someone was Googling you or looking you up for a promotion or for something that you're really hoping to gain, that allows you to then be one step closer to that, because all of the content that's out on Google, out in the internet, is really supporting that brand that you've developed. The other thing is, be honest about your time in order to prioritize. So you really want to think about the fact that, if you figure out you need to be on 4 different networks, but you only have time to be on one, I definitely prioritize that. It's much better to be more active on one channel than to be kind of active on 4. And so pick the ones that are most important. If you identify that your boss is by far the most important buyer persona that needs to buy into your brand for you to get your goal, then I would say choose whatever channel he or she is on. Prioritize that, and then as you gain more time and more maybe efficiency and you figure out what works, then you can add more to it. But I would definitely be prioritizing what you're doing. And then finally, redefine yourself and goals whenever necessary. I got a question once from someone who said, I'm launching my personal brand, but I'm not really sure what I want to do yet. Should I wait, to do something very permanent? And what I realize now, especially with that story, so many people want to buy into a story. That's really popular. It's much more popular to do that than say, okay, well, I'm a professional and you should pay attention to me. But if they saw your journey from beginning to end, a lot of times that's a lot more relatable. So I would say, start today and don't be afraid to redefine yourself as you go. And then when you look back, you can just talk about all that growth and that journey, and that just supports all the experience and why you're even more relevant. So as you're kind of going through this, I definitely recommend, working through it, adjusting it as needed, and then determining, what's the most important use of your time. And that's going to really help you be more efficient and be more successful. So I would love to answer any questions you might have. I would definitely, this is something where it's more like a workshop. So I would, use the PDF guide, download my slides, and that's going to really let you kind of work through this. It's like pen and paper to really figure out what's most important and how to prioritize. But thank you so much, and I am happy to take any questions that you might have and in the chat.
Thank you, Ronnie, and I hope people get some good questions to ask and take advantage of having your expertise here and advice. I see some typing going on in the chat box on the lower, and again, you can access that from the lower right-hand purple menu on the page there. Just click on the chat bubble.
Perfect. So, so Amy asked, what is something you wish you knew 5 years ago about branding? Actually, I think probably what I had just said was my biggest. Oh, I should have started this a long time ago. A lot of times I was afraid to commit to branding myself. I was nervous to make an Instagram and not have that many followers. I was nervous to commit to say, this is who I am when my goals might change. Especially as a business owner, I wasn't exactly sure, how I wanted my branding to be. And I think what I realized is I should have just went for it and launched it and let my story be told by, the history of the content that I was sharing. So whether that was an Instagram, profile that maybe started 5 years ago for my company that showed my day-to-day life back then and where I am now. That growth is so important, and I think that a lot of people want to hold off and not do it until they're sure what they want or sure of their goals. And I think it's more important to kind of represent where you are today, and you'll start seeing a lot more positive responses from that. But great question. I see some other people typing, so just wait for a second. All right, so here they come through. So Naomi asked, what got you interested in marketing and starting your own consulting business? For me, I would say, marketing, I actually just wanted to start a business. And I went to Northeastern thinking I wanted to do management and marketing. I'm sorry, management and entrepreneurship. And my co-op advisor at the time told me that I could never get, I wouldn't really be able to get an internship in either of those things. So I needed to pick something a little bit more tangible and replace one of them. So I chose marketing because I realized that, if I have a business one day, I should be able to sell that business, and marketing was going to help me do that. And now what I've realized, especially with with social media and everything like that, it's become so relevant. And I'm so fortunate that I had actually ended up going into marketing, not by my initial first choice, but by default when I needed to get a good internship. And really, the consulting side came from the fact that I just really love working with small businesses. And I don't find that there's a lot of big kind of marketing solutions for small businesses when it comes to outsourcing that work. So I really thought that I could come up with something where I'm thinking about the limited time and limited resources that entrepreneurs have, and really all of us. I mean, I feel like nowadays there's so many things that we need to absorb and be reading, and webinars we need to be attending. And so I really like to be able to come up with strategies that work with limited time and limited resources, because I think a lot of people don't think about, how hard that can be. And so prioritizing is really important to me. Doug asked, how would you recommend branding yourself in a new business venture with no experience? That's a great question. I would definitely recommend just starting off and introducing you as who you are. So, if it's something where it's your passions, maybe it's about the fact that you're responding to the market. You can definitely talk a lot about sort of your journey to why you're starting this new business venture, and necessarily refer back to the fact that maybe you're not an expert in that new industry. But I would be curious to see, okay, well, what motivated you to do that? Why are you starting a business? Maybe putting up a business card or a website page that at least validates that you're doing it. So even if that changes down the road, people see that you're motivated and see that, you're taking yourself seriously. And so a lot of those marketing materials, like a website, a business card, updating your LinkedIn and saying that, you're an entrepreneur. I mean, those little things can really make a big difference, and people will take you seriously because you're actually speaking about yourself in that way. So Danielle said, how did you learn to believe in your ideas and longevity of your impact? This is probably something I struggle with. And hi, Danielle. We work together at Northeastern Career Center. But I would say it took a long time, and I think experience was the biggest thing that over time I realized, wow, I'm not just telling people my opinions. I'm sharing based on experience. I'm sharing, all of this information about professional branding because I've seen it work, and I've done it myself, and I'm seeing, my time being more efficiently spent because I'm attracting the right type of people to my brand. So I think it was just experience and willing to try new things so that I can experience the goods and the bads and the things that worked and didn't work. So that was probably definitely something I'm still working on, but it definitely helps when I can say, I've worked with clients and people that have gone through exactly what you're describing or similar challenges, and I can apply that knowledge to whoever I'm making new recommendations to. Um, let's see. So from Cindy, how do we determine our audience or demographic that we want to reach out to? I'm in both the social impact sector and training and development. That's a great question. So how do we determine our audience? I think what you have to think about is, who do you need to be in your content for them to reach your goals. So that might be, if you're trying to, do training and development, you probably need people who are going to be taking those courses or working with you to buy in. So where are they? Understanding sort of, the different types of behaviors that people might take, in order to participate in that. So, are they going into training and development because they just switched to a new job? Or is it because they've been in the same job for a long time? So I would start kind of thinking through, what are those moments where people are defining their problem and where are you the solution? And then you can kind of figure out who those people are kind of going back from that. So a lot of times I like to think about, most people don't, at least small business owners maybe don't know necessarily that I'm, that marketing consulting or hiring a small business marketing agent is a solution for them. They don't even know that. But their initial problem is, how do I build a business page on Facebook? So one of the things I might think to do is how do I create content around that, solving that first initial problem, so then they meet me and learn how to, all the other options that they could answer through what I do. So I would think about it that way. I hope that answered the question. That was a little, I'd have to think about that a little bit. So definitely whoever asked that, you can shoot me an email and I can think a little bit more specifically about what you do. Any advice for coming up with a tagline? Yes, actually, I love doing Google searches in the news kind of version, because the people who write the news articles and write the headlines for news are very creative. So if you type in a few of the keywords that you want to put in your tagline and then do a Google News search, just kind of comb through the pages, the first few pages, and read the headlines, and even sometimes that preview text underneath on a Google search, and you'll just see there's some creative ways that people are describing it, and then you can add your spin to it. So I use Google News search a lot to kind of get some creative ways of making a short caption or tagline. What resources can you recommend for clearing inaccurate data on your past profile? That's a tough one. Hiring an intern just to go through and delete everything might be the best solution, but yeah, I do find, like, I've had a few people where, they were starting a campaign and they needed to delete old data that was really not reflecting what they were doing, and we actually did go manually and delete it. Especially it was like a past Facebook page. I would just, if you really need a fresh start, I would just take down and delete the page and then start a new one, and eventually it won't be listed on Google. But if it's something where you still want your followers, you don't want to lose that, or there's, definitely things where you need to correct it. If you have control over it, usually it's a manual process. If you don't have control over it, I do have no problem. Like I email websites all the time for clients and say, the address is wrong. Can you please replace this? Giving people, the most accurate data as I can. And then if it's still not corrected, I just make sure I have more content that I've published that's better content that it can be ranked ahead of that. So I think just the more content that you create, maybe you make an extra profile on Twitter just to make sure it's not, it's showing up ahead of whatever that old content is. Mary asked, how do you manage fear of failure? That's a great question. I fear of failure. Like even today, I came to this and I have two dogs in my office, and I was scared my internet was gonna lose, and I was scared that or disconnect, and I was scared that the dogs would go crazy because something happened. So I think that the best advice I could give is, usually when you're worrying about something, you're worrying about a story that you've made up. It actually hasn't happened. So I tend to feel like, think about worry like that, and that fear that from that, it can motivate you, but I would also think that you can put yourself out there. And what's the worst that can happen? I definitely think, I think of those celebrities and Instagrammers who get a lot of trolls and people on social media, writing negative things. And that's definitely something when you're putting a brand out there that you could be fearful of and not want to do. But I would highly recommend thinking about it like, it's putting yourself out there. Sometimes that's what you have to do to reach your goals. So if that goal is definitely something where it's worth the risk and worth the challenge, I think that can sometimes trump the fear of failure. But I'm definitely still dealing with that. But I think that failure is the best teacher. So I hope sometimes I fail just so that I can learn from that experience. Further question regarding info on past profile. Okay, so this is a follow-up question on the past profile. Related to what appears from Google searches. So that's definitely, if you don't have control over what's appearing on your Google search, I would 100% then create new content so that over time it replaces the first page. So if we can push that old content to the second page of the Google results, a lot of people don't get there. So think about, like, can you write a blog? Can you set up a new profile? Can you add directory listings? You have a Google My Business page. Do you have all the types of things that would be ahead of whatever that old piece of content is? So I would think about sort of, kind of adding more and more content. Like I always say with people with Yelp, who are business owners, you want to avoid Yelp because you don't want a negative review. But if you avoid it and then that one person writes a negative review, that's the only thing that's there. So the best thing to do is kind of proactively try to collect positive things or create content so that it offsets anything negative that may be showing up, there as well. So if you ended up having a Yelp profile where sure there's one negative review but there's 10 amazing reviews, I think most people reading that would say, okay, well clearly that one person was just angry about something else. So it definitely helps to kind of have other content around it that sort of says, okay, well this isn't accurate, I'm going to trust the other stuff because everything else is consistent. The next question is, if you're not used to regularly participating in social media conversations, postings, suggestions for how to get this going. Yes, I would say first pick your network, pick one network to focus on. It's really overwhelming to do a lot at once. And I find that, when you pick one, you can be an expert in that one. And then sometimes the results are better than if you were trying to do all of them. So I would start with one, and then I usually recommend my two go-to sort of resources when it comes to social media is one is HubSpot. They're in Cambridge. They do a lot of great posts, really great how-to guides. So if you decide, LinkedIn is what you want to do, Google LinkedIn, like LinkedIn strategy HubSpot, and guaranteed HubSpot will have an article about LinkedIn and give you those tips specifically for that network. Specifically social media, the other one I like is Sprout Social. Sprout Social is actually a scheduling tool, and they do a lot of guides and outlines for pretty much all the networks. So I would just kind of pick some of those articles and read through those. But 100%, if you're not regularly using them, I would pick one and then get really good at that one before you start trying to learn more of them. And then Amy asked, do you deliberately take time out of every day to focus on your brand, or are your branding activities more natural? This is a really hard question because I wish I had more time to focus on my brand, and I find that I do this talk. I've done this a few times now, and I'm always afterwards kind of ashamed about how little time I spend on it, even though I know I should. And I think it really depends on the urgency of your goals. So if you really feel like you need your goals to be achieved in 6 months, and there's no wiggle room there, and I would say put 100% into your professional goals and into your developing your brand. Personally, I kind of face where I'm like, oh, I should be doing Instagram story, or I should be doing this. So for me, I prioritized, and I knew that, the most effective marketing tool for me and my brand was, posting on Instagram and featuring, women-owned companies and my podcast. So those are my priorities, and I try to spend as much time as I can there. Some of the branding activities are more natural because I'm experiencing my day-to-day, but from hearing from my clients and in my experience, I find that it's really, really difficult to think in the moment that what you're doing is interesting to anyone to anyone else. And so I would say that, sometimes it's helpful, especially for Instagram story, if that's something that you're trying to do. Like for my clients, I usually come up with like 3 themes. Like these are 3 things to try to check off the list every week. And, make those little goals for yourself. And then those natural moments will be like, oh, right, I have to do this today, and you'll find that moment to take a photo of your coffee or whatever that is. But I would definitely think about, if you've got limited time, prioritize your schedule. If you've got goals that you need to achieve and your brand is so important to achieving that, I would say prioritize that over maybe some of the other things that you might be thinking about doing. Like maybe instead of going to a networking event, set up the foundation first and then go to the networking event, because it's really going to be important to have this all figured out before you go and spend your time networking with people, because then they won't come back and find anything that's interesting. Great. Any other questions? I think the chat kind of slowed down. I think we're about wrapped up anyway, but great questions. But anyone welcome. I mean, my Twitter and my Instagram are there. You can DM me. You could also contact me through my website if you do have any questions. I'm happy to answer them offline and help you with that.
Thank you all for these wonderful questions. It was a great discussion. And Rani, your depth of expertise and knowledge really comes across here, and at the same time, you make it sound easy. So that's a really winning combination. I encourage people to really go through the worksheet, as I was able myself to do in the live workshop that I attended with Rani. It'll really help you flesh out your goals and your strategy. So thank you again to Rani for the great content and sharing your expertise with us. And thanks again to all of you for joining us. Feel free, when we do send you a survey, if you have ideas of other programs you'd love to see or other topics, we're always looking for what's going to be most helpful to you. So thanks again to all of you, and we look forward to seeing you on future webinars.
Yeah, thanks everyone.